The Anaheim Ducks have been one of the most interesting and fascinating young teams in the NHL for the last couple years, but they just haven't been able to put it all together on the ice yet. Will bringing in one of the winningest coaches in NHL history help turn that around? This is the 2025-26 Deep Dive on the Anaheim Ducks. Hello and welcome to team number 23 in my preseason power rankings. We are talking about the Anaheim Ducks, and this is a team that so many people have very high expectations for and have had pretty high expectations for the last couple of years, and they just seem to be a team that is constantly kind of in that discussion for, you know, one of the best young talented rosters in the league, and just can't seem to break through year over year. And they made some pretty big changes this summer to their core. They didn't make a ton of moves per se, but they did make some pretty significant ones. The first one obviously being the Mikael Granlund signing, who we will talk about, but somebody who, you know, probably was overpaid for what he'll be, but they're a team that needed to spend some cap anyway, so it's not going to be that big of a deal for them in that sense, and it wasn't a long deal, so it's not too concerning. They also traded out Trevor Zegras, which was the big move that they made in terms of moving guys out, and Zegras is a fascinating piece to get moved here because I had a lot of hope for him, especially in Joel Quenneville's system, and I was very intrigued to see how that was going to work. And obviously he won't get the chance to do that. He was shipped off to Philly. We've talked about Trevor Zegras already, so you can go check out the Flyers episode if you're interested in that. And they also brought in Chris Kreider, which happened at the very beginning of the offseason. So a lot of people might have missed that one and forgot that happened. But yes, Chris Kreider was brought in very early in the offseason. And of course, you know, they brought in Jacob Trouba last year, so they'll get a full year out of him. They traded out John Gibson. So the team as a whole looks a little bit different in terms of like the core pieces. There is rumors that Mason McTavish could get traded, but at the time of recording this, like I said in the Islanders video, I'm still on vacation when this is coming out, so I'm recording this about a week in advance. The Mason McTavish is still on the Ducks, so I'm going to treat this as if Mason McTavish is an Anaheim Duck. And yeah, it's an interesting situation in that sense, and we'll kind of see how that ends up playing out for this team as we kind of move forward. And, you know, you look at the overview for this team, and the numbers don't look great in terms of this, and you're going to be kind of curious why they're so high compared to the rankings. And a lot of it has to do with the coaching culture. Like, I think, you know, this is a team that did fairly well last year under Greg Cronin, and I think that can only improve under Joel Quenneville, who we will talk about in a second, and kind of my thoughts on him as a coach per se. But offense, I have 28th. I just don't see there's not like the dynamicness of this offense hasn't proven it yet. They do have a ton of guys who could easily pop, but they just haven't popped yet. So that's why they get the lower rating there. But the potential is there, and that could be or that is one of the contributing reasons as to why they're a little bit higher on my power rankings than the grades initially point to. 26 defensively, again a defense that with some development, some growth, could outplay that fairly easily. 21st in goaltending. Again, it's just I need to see Lucas Dostal do this again. I think he had a great year, but his numbers beyond that really haven't been. I think, you know, his numbers previous to last year have been a little overrated. So it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of repeat what he did last year. I think he should be able to, but again, like I think it's more of a he needs to go out and prove it again. But we'll touch on Dostal later in the video. Special teams is 26th. It wasn't great last year. I think that it should, again, be improved going into this season. And then coaching culture is 17th. GM-wise, they've been okay. But obviously the coaching and bringing in Joel Quenneville should help with that overall rating. So jumping into the coaching culture, I think Pat Verbeek I have it as a C. I think there's some moves that he's made that have been very good. I think that like the Cutter Gauthier trade, for instance, was a really nice piece of business for him. But then there's been some other moves, like they really didn't get a ton back in the Jacob Trouba move, which was basically a cap dump for the Rangers, and they kind of just took him on. The John Gibson trade was fine, I guess. Like it wasn't crazy. You know, I disagreed with the Trevor Zegras move. I think that he's somebody that I would have liked to see under Joel Quenneville's system. I think he's done a lot of good work with super high skilled, wingers in the past, and I think that Trevor Zegras kind of fit that mold. And then so it's been kind of a mixed bag. The Mikael Granlund contract isn't anything special. His drafting's been fine. So like it's really kind of a mixed bag for me with Pat Verbeek. So that's why he gets a C. I just think that he's in kind of that tier of GM at this moment because he hasn't really proved anything, and the core that he's built hasn't really won anything. So it's kind of hard for me to, like, I'm not looking at him saying that he's won a bunch of trades and like has this great, extremely loaded prospect pool that's coming up, and the prospect pool is good, but I don't know if it's like, it's not like, very, very top of the league. But it is good. I'm not trying to say that it's not, but the team that's on the ice also hasn't really won anything, so it's kind of hard for me to grade him very well in that. There's nothing I can really point to as like a standout section of this team. The other thing is Joel Quenneville, and Joel Quenneville only have it a B+, simply because he hasn't been in the league for a couple of years, right? Like he was very good in his very short time in Florida, and then we kind of saw him leave, and then Andrew Burnett was able to take over, and there was like they didn't miss a beat. So the time away is kind of what gives me the B+ rating. He'd probably be in like the A- tier if he had just immediately went from that Florida job to here, because his last couple years in Chicago weren't great, but the team wasn't very good. The big discussion with Joe Quenneville obviously is the off-ice things, and I'm not going to get into that here because I've gotten into it before. We have a podcast episode where I go into it, so if you want to go back and listen to that, you can, because I go a lot more into my thoughts on Joel Quenneville there. So that's not, I'm going to keep this just to the hockey conversation at the moment, and like he's going to be an upgrade over Greg Cronin, or he should be an upgrade over Greg Cronin. But I have them as a tweener team at C+. I think that there's a path for the Ducks to push for a wild card spot. I think that the Pacific being as weak as it is, and kind of the bottom of the Central not being like super fantastic either, leaves room for the Ducks to potentially take a step forward. They just need a lot more things to go right than some of the teams above them on this list. So that's why they're where they are. But there is definitely a world where the Ducks could push up into a potential wildcard spot, and we're kind of in that tier now, right? Like all the teams from here on up basically are teams that like I think have a legitimate shot at a playoff spot with varying probabilities. But this is kind of the start of that next tier. If you kind of want to tier the rankings that I've done, this is kind of like my third tier. We had our absolute basement dwellers, which are probably just Chicago and San Jose, and maybe Buffalo, depending on how you feel about Buffalo. But even then, I'd probably put Buffalo closer to the has an really outside shot at a playoff spot. Now we're kind of in the real, like, not quite bubble teams, but like teams that, like, if they made the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised kind of tier. So if that's kind of how you want to look at it, this is the start of that. And I mean, we look at their numbers last year, and they were 24th in the league, 20th in goals for, 20th in goals against, but not very good in terms of their expected numbers. 26th in expected goals for, 30th in expected goals against. The power play was 32nd. The penalty kill was 29th. I see that possibly taking a step up this year. You'd hope so anyway. And like I think the fact that this team has a ton of young talent on it makes me believe more in that. But it's going to be an interesting situation to see if that's necessarily the case. Like I said, their numbers aren't, like, there's nothing here that really flashed out to you aside from the goaltending. And even then, like, Dostal had a fantastic year last year. But it's the full goaltending unit, and losing John Gibson really hanks them down. If they still had Gibson, they'd definitely be significantly higher than 21st in my rankings going into this. But it's just the pairing of Dostal only having one true year of high-end play under his belt, and losing John Gibson, who had a pretty solid season last year. So that gives me a bit of pause in terms of truly believing in this goaltending unit. But it's definitely a unit that I wouldn't be surprised takes a significant jump before the end of the season in my rankings. Looking at this offense, it's a unique unit, right? Like, it feels like there's a lot of hope here in terms of guys who could work out really well, but there's also like a lot of potential for this really not to work out. First of all, like if the Ducks trade Mason McTavish, like I don't get it. Like I don't understand why that would be the case. They really don't have like obviously we're hoping Leo Carlsson could be your number one center this year, but other than that, like there's not really like a true 2C here. I guess you can play Granlund there if you really wanted to, but I don't love that move. Like I feel like you're trying to build something positive at this point. And you can't really do that if you're moving a bunch of guys out. But like Leo Carlson's super exciting, Cutter Gauthier is super exciting, Troy Terry is awesome, and one of the most underrated players in the league. And then like the depth on this team is good. Like Chris Kreider's still a really useful player. Mikael Granlund's still a pretty useful player. Killorn has moments, especially defensively. He can be a really strong piece for them. I still think there's something left in Vetrano and Ryan Strome. They just have to kind of figure it out. But I think there's still some juice left in that. Jensen Harkin's a good like defensive fourth liner. Ryan Poehling I actually really like. Now Ryan Poehling's not going to move the needle for this team. He's a fourth liner, but as far as fourth liners go, I think Ryan Poehling's pretty solid. And then there's some other depth on this team. Like they have some other younger players who could definitely crack this lineup that I'd be interested in seeing. Moving forward, and I think that there's definitely a possibility for some guys to get into this roster. Troy Terry, like I said, is one of the more underrated players in the league. Now he's going to his age 28 season, which is crazy. Like it feels like he was just a rookie like yesterday, when him and Zegras were coming up and being like, this is the next like face of the Ducks, and now all of a sudden he's 28. With 5 years left on a $7 million deal, which is a pretty good contract, by the way. But, offensively, really, really dynamic guy, can really lead a rush. I trust him as, a top-line forward on a team. Now, do I think he should be the number one forward on this team? No, and you're hoping that both Leo Carlsson and Cutter Gauthier can jump ahead of him at some point. Maybe even Mason McTavish, but at this point, like, I don't know what the ceiling is on Mason McTavish as a forward, but Troy Terry is your third option on a team, even your second option on a really good team, is perfectly fine. Like I think he's super useful as a player. Obviously, like he's playing against really strong competition. His power play numbers are very good. His finishing isn't great, and I think that's an area of his game that he needs to kind of improve upon. But again, like his play driving is really good. His defensive metrics are league average. Like they're fine in that sense. It's just the finishing that needs to get better, and if he can kind of become more of a sustainable scorer, then he could really become a super versatile piece on a team that is trying to compete for a playoff spot. And I think Troy Terry is definitely somebody that you can rely on, as a top line guy, and I definitely see him fitting into that role fairly well here, and he has fit into that role fairly well here in Anaheim, and hopefully they can give him some stability here now, with guys like Carlsson and Gauthier, and even some of the veterans they brought in, and give him more of a sustainable base, because it's been kind of in flux the last couple of years, especially now that moving out Zegras and Zegras injuries and stuff too. It was really kind of up in the air, like who he was going to be playing with night to night, and now that Carlsson and Gauthier are there, you'd assume that those are going to be the guys that he'll slot in with, at least one of them. And then, you still have Kreider and Granlund and McTavish too. So the talent around him is definitely the best, like at least in that top six, is probably like the best top six that he's had in terms of overall talent. So, you'd hope that will help elevate his game as well. Cutter Gauthier is one of those guys who I talked about there. And I mean, 20-goal season. He definitely has the potential to continue to pop. Now, the defensive metrics are a little scary. He was a pretty bad defender last year, and I think cleaning that up is going to be an important part of his game. And even just, it doesn't necessarily have to be him cleaning it up. It's just putting him in more, favorable situations to be an offense creator and not have to worry about defensive responsibility. But if he can become more effective as a defender, even like, it doesn't have to become like Superman, but just like, closer to league average, then he can really be an effective overall player. He can be a lot more effective overall player. He can bring a lot more net positive value to the Ducks, and I think he can do it. I mean, he's still super young. This isn't like, I'm not talking about somebody who's 29 years old here. He as a prospect basically. there's still a ton of room for him to grow, and I think that given him consistent top 6 minutes, you averaged 14 minutes a night last year. You trying to boost that up a little bit. He's going to help, right? Keep putting him in tougher situations, see how he fares in those situations, and if he sinks, then you kind of have your answer of what you got, and if he swims, which I think he would, then you're going to have a super effective player here, and that's obviously why the Ducks traded for him, and so far, at least offensively, he was extremely useful last year. It's just cleaning up the defensive game a little bit, and if he can do that, then you could be looking at a very good 1-2 punch on the wings with him and Troy Terry. Leo Carlsson is a player that really hasn't fully found his game yet, right? Like it's been 2 years now, and I feel like he's still kind of been struggling a little bit with the first line center and top 6 center kind of minutes, and they're really he hasn't excelled anywhere yet. It's just more of a waiting to see if he can pop. And again, I have full faith in Leo Carlsson. I really liked him out of the draft, and I think it's just going to be a time thing, right? It's only been 2 years, right? So I'm not trying to say that he's a bust right now. I think that's ridiculous, but he's just kind of been okay overall, right? He's had flashes where he's looked really good, and he's had flashes where he hasn't. And I think it's just about trying to raise the floor a little bit instead of trying to extend the ceiling. I think if you can just raise his floor enough, then it will kind of make up for those bad days. So and this is another reason why I wouldn't trade Mason McTavish, right? It's just you don't really have a safety net behind him, and McTavish has proven enough that he can play in those bigger roles. So I think as long as you have that safety net, then you can kind of coddle Leo Carlsson up a little bit, and you can kind of massage him into the lineup a bit more, which will help his overall development instead of just throwing him into the first line center role and then having Mikael Granlund and Ryan Strome be the options behind him, which really neither of those are long-term options on this team. So I still have a ton of faith in Leo Carlsson. I think anybody writing him off is ridiculous, but he's somebody that I think needs to have a big year this year, or at least a more consistently good year this season for the Ducks in order for people to really take this team seriously, right? I think that's part of the reason why the Ducks are kind of looked at as this team that just can't really, reach their potential. And if he can continue to develop and really kind of show it this season, then a lot of those questions are going to be answered. And I think he will. I love Leo Carlsson. This isn't me trying to rip on the kid at all, but it's just kind of we need to see the product come through at this point, and we haven't seen it consistently yet. So I'm excited to see if he can bring that this year. Chris Kreider still has enough left in the tank that he's a fascinating piece for the team, and he's definitely going to help out in terms of the power play. His power play numbers have been really, really good, and for a team that struggled in the power play last year, I do think that he'll add some value to this team. Now he only has 2 years left at a substantial cap hit, but he's going to his age 34 season, so there isn't a ton of he's not going to get better at this point. So you have to expect him to take a bit of a fall off, but the power play numbers should still stay pretty stable, as those don't there's a lot more control, puck control rather than rush on the power play. So it's a lot easier to be good later in your career. But I worry a little bit about the age, right? Going into 34 and then 35 for his last year. I don't know how much dynamic value he's going to continue to bring to this team. If they can play him in more of a third line role and kind of shelter his minutes a little bit, that'll be helpful. Not that his defense is terrible, but it's just I think you need to you want to get the full 2 years of value out of him, and I think throwing him into a first line or even a second line role consistently night in and night out could wear him out a little bit. And we saw that a little bit in New York as well. So making sure that he can kind of age gracefully into this is going to be important. And you might not get you're probably not going to get a $6.5 million player out of him at this point in either year. But trying to get a $4.5 to $5 million player out of him for both years will add value, right? If you can get $9.5 to $10 million out of the 13.5 or whatever they're paying him, 13 and a half, 13 I guess, then that'll be that'll be fine, right? Like that, you kind of have to just accept that if you're the Ducks at this point. That's why you brought him in, to be a veteran presence, a leader on this team, and he's going to do all those things. He's also going to be a pretty effective player, depending on how they use him, right? Like I think if you overextend him, then he's going to look a lot worse than he necessarily has to pretty quickly. So it's just kind of about managing that and making sure that you can use him effectively. And if they can do that, then Chris Kreider could be a nice depth add for the Ducks here, and I don't know how effective he'll be, being a true second line winger on this team. I think he's better served in the bottom six. Mason McTavish is again the guy that's kind of on the trade block. I don't know if he'll actually get traded, but he's a pretty good play driver. He creates a decent amount of contributions. He's able to get some good chances. There is some parts of his game that do scare me. His defensive retrievals are pretty bad, and for him to even become one of those top centers, he needs to get better at that, right? Like he needs to get better at being able to get out of his zone with the puck and get the puck more successfully on battles. And if he can improve that this year, then all of a sudden you have a pretty good two-way center. If you can't, then I don't want to say his value is limited, because I don't think that's necessarily the case, but I don't know how much Joel Quenneville is going to want to play him, right? Because Joel Quenneville has had a thing where like his winger, like even on his good teams, right, even on Chicago, like his wingers were pretty he was kind of okay with his wingers being one-dimensional, right? Like Jonathan or Patrick Kane was extremely one-dimensional in terms of offensive contributions compared to defensive contributions, but he always had really stable defensive two-way centers, and I think that's what he ideally wants here, and that's where Mason McTavish's trade talks might be coming up, because he just doesn't see that playing out. But I really think that I think Mason McTavish could benefit from a year under Joel Quenneville, and just seeing what that looks like at the end of this season. So it's an interesting situation. I'm going to assume that they keep him on the team, because I don't think that unless they're trading him for another center, then maybe that works out. But I don't think like the Ducks are in a position to move him up for futures. I think this is a team that needs to kind of turn the corner sooner rather than later. I don't think they can wait for another first round pick to pan out before that happens. So it's an interesting situation. I don't think that if he does get moved, I think it's more of a hockey trade than a futures move, because I don't know if that really helps where the Ducks are at this point. But I like Mason McTavish. I think they should keep him, and I think teams looking for a second line center should be calling, because he's probably the best one out there right now. Him and Marco Rossi, or I guess Rossi might be better, but they're fairly comparable. Mason McTavish obviously has a longer history case in terms of value, so that might be what puts him over the top. But I think he's a really intriguing player, and teams looking for a center should be able to get some value out of him, and I don't think the Ducks should move him. So there you go. Mikael Granlund was the free agent pickup for the Ducks this year. They paid him a lot of money, and I don't know if he'll necessarily play full-time at center. They paid him like he was going to be a center, but it's kind of, if you're now, Puckpedia has him as a winger, so we'll see. If they trade McTavish, then he's the natural fit to slot in as the second-line center. But regardless, Mikael Granlund is a very good play driver. He really turned his career around in San Jose. Like, he was given a much bigger role in San Jose, I think, compared to where he was in Pittsburgh. And he really grew into that role. Like, he looked really good in San Jose. Now, I think his value might have been a little overrated in San Jose because of just how bad that team was and how positive the value that he brought to them was. And then in Dallas, he had some really good moments in Dallas too. So I'm not trying to take anything away from him there. I mean, 66 points. But I don't know if he'll be able to, continue that and sustain that over the course of a couple of years. I mean, his defense is already pretty bad. But like offensively, he's really good, especially when you put him with talented players. And I think that was kind of the problem in Pittsburgh, was he's kind of just thrown on a third line with guys that weren't super dynamic. And whereas in Dallas and even in San Jose, right, he was playing at the top of the lineup, and that definitely helped. So in Anaheim, that's why I think like playing him with guys like McTavish could help kind of bring the best out of Mikael Granlund. Whereas, like, if he's becomes the third line center and he's playing with, more defensively guys, I don't know if you'll get as dynamic of an offensive game out of him. So it's very interesting to see how he'll play out here. I'm intrigued. It's not a long contract, so it's not like a huge anchor for this team, but I am fascinated to see kind of how that whole process and this game plan here really pans out for Granlund. I think he's a super interesting player. It's awesome to see the turnaround that he had in San Jose. If the NHL had a most improved player, he would have got my vote for it after his first year in San Jose, because he went from being a anchor of a contract to a player that I actually really liked and I still really like. So he's interesting. I don't love the contract, but I think he fits well enough here in Anaheim. And again, he'll be able to bring some veteran presence and still be a useful player, right? Like, a lot of teams talk about, we'll bring in some guy to be a leader in the locker room, but it's a aging vet that was never really good. Whereas, like, Mikael Granlund's still super useful hockey player. So he adds value that way too. Ryan Poehling I want to touch on because I like Ryan Poehling. And obviously they got him in the trade for Trevor Zegras. He was the player coming back. Now, Ryan Poehling's not going to come in and be a top six forward for this team. But he is somebody who can add, a bit of scoring to a bottom six. He does still have that offensive flair. Obviously, everybody remembers him from the hat-trick game in Montreal, which was, feels like an infinite number of years ago. But he can add some value there, right, where he can be, a sneaky offensive guy. But his real value comes defensively. He is somebody who is a pretty good, shutdown fourth-line center. And what gives me value for him is because he does have that offensive flair to him, right? Whereas a lot of, your other shutdown, bottom of the lineup defensive players are kind of just low-event hockey players. But, Ryan Poehling's, pretty league average in terms of what he can bring offensively. I think he's probably slightly better than league average. Especially compared to, the other fourth-line centers around the league. And, being able to bring almost like a bargain bin kind of Timu two-way center to your roster is really valuable. And I think he's super underrated because of the fact that he had this, this huge pop when he first came into the league. I mean, he won like MVP of the World Juniors, and then he came in and scored the hat-trick in his first game in Montreal in the Bell Center, and everybody was going crazy for him, and then he just turned out to be the bottom six center that he was projected to be out of the draft, and it's like, oh, wow, that's crazy. So I think, he gets underrated because of that, but I really like Ryan Poehling. I think he's a super, super fascinating player, and I think he'll fit really well here. He'll be somebody that you'll see Joel Quenneville rely upon a lot, I feel, in big situations. This is kind of the center that I expect to be hopping over the boards quite a bit this year for the Ducks. And I think that's really good because, Ryan Poehling's still heading into his age 27 season. He's not old. And, seeing a player like this still have a ton of value is really cool. And I think it's rare because a lot of people would have just given up on him because of, his how high the expectations were going into his rookie season and then seeing them fall off after that. So I'm excited for him. I hope that I wish him the best because I really like Ryan Poehling. And I think, like I said, I think he fits really well in what the Ducks kind of have offensively here. Alex Killorn is another player that I want to touch on because he is, 30. He's going to his age 36 season. He's getting paid a lot of money for another 2 years. But defensively, he's held up pretty well. And on the penalty kill, he's held up exceptionally well. He's one of the best penalty kill forwards in the league, which is incredible for his age. But his positioning is just fantastic. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to. Somebody that grew up in the John Cooper system and was developed in that. It's crazy that Alex Killorn's 36 years old. Like, that's just mind-boggling to me. But he's somebody that grew up in that John Cooper system and was able to, learn that defensive positioning from him, which I think does really help older players, right? Like, a lot of good young players that are good defensively are just fast and able to get to spots quickly, whereas, players who are able to age gracefully as defenders are a lot better. Like, their hockey IQ is a lot higher, and they're able to their positioning is a lot better, and Alex Killorn just always seems to be in the right place to get into shooting lanes and passing lanes and to intercept, disrupt plays. And you really see that, especially in his penalty kill stuff, and the numbers back it up for sure. So I really like that. He also does have, a scoring touch. His finishing is very good, although his play driving isn't. And again, that probably has to come down to the age. But as a defensive, third line winger, Alex Killorn can be super useful. And I I like him for that. And again, like I think having these stable veterans behind these younger guys kind of help propping them up is actually, could be very useful for the Ducks here. And I don't think that, Alex Killorn's this liability that maybe his contract, like he's not a $6.3 million player, but what he can bring defensively on the ice is super valuable. And if he can keep that up right now, it doesn't matter how good your positioning is. If you can't, keep up with players, it's going to be hard. So going to his age 36 season, it's going to be hard to see him maintain these numbers. His penalty kill numbers should still stay relatively really good. I think his even strength numbers might take a bit of a dip, but overall, Alex Killorn's a super, super fun player, and it's cool to see him aging as gracefully as he is, because obviously he was developed in a very, very strong system, and you're seeing kind of the rewards from that come through here in what Anaheim has with him. Looking at this blue line, it's really fascinating to me. Jackson Lacombe had this insane breakout last year. He was one of the brightest spots on this blue line that had some hiccups, right? Because Radko Gudas, I still really like. He's still a really strong defensive defenseman. But he fell off a little bit, right? He wasn't as good as he was the year before. I mean, Pavel Mintyukov's fall off needs to be studied, because he looked really good going into last season. He had a great, really strong year 2 years ago. And then last year, they gave him a bigger role, and he just couldn't handle it. And I'm interested to see how he's used this year, because I think that Joel Quenneville might be able to kind of bring some of that spark back that was there 2 years ago, and get him to be a really strong, like, second pair defenseman. And if that's the case, then that will really make this blue line look really good, because I think there's a lot of potential here. I mean, if Jackson Lacombe can continue to be a first pair defenseman and improve on that, then that's the hardest thing, right? You have that settled, and now you just kind of have to fill out the rest of the roster. Radko Gudas can be a good 2-3 guy. Jacob Trouba can still be a good, like, number 4. It's just Pavel Mintyukov and Olen Zellweger are kind of the two players that I really look at this blue line that need to take steps forward. And if both of them can, if Mintyukov can step in and be a number 3, then that'll be great. And if Olen Zellweger can look like a top 4 defenseman, then this blue line is going to be pretty solid. And that's when, if all those things happen, that's when you can start talking about the Ducks, pushing for a playoff spot, right? I think it's the offense. The young guys need to keep stepping up, right? You need Leo Carlsson to look like a first line center, or Mason McTavish to look like a first line center. Cutter Gauthier needs to be a top 6 winger, a really strong top six winger, and you need Lacombe to stay steady, and Mintyukov and Zellweger to take big steps. And if those things happen, then yeah, the Ducks making the playoffs is a pretty it wouldn't even be like an outside shot. I think it's kind of likely, especially with how weak the Pacific is, and how kind of wide open that third spot in the Pacific might be this year. It wouldn't surprise me if they can exceed those expectations and get to that spot. It's just a lot of things that need to happen, and that's the thing, right? It's like 4 or 5 players that need to take significant steps up, and that's a lot to ask for one season. It's happened before. It happened in Florida, under Joel Quenneville. So, fair enough. There's a very infamous post that I made about why I'm low on the Florida Panthers, and they proceeded to just win everything ever since that post came out. And one of the big things I pointed out in that post is that every single person on that team popped at the same time, and it's unlikely that continues, which, whatever. Here we are. But the Ducks are kind of in a similar situation. So it is possible. It's under a coach who's done it before with a team. Now, I'm not saying that the Ducks are going to turn into what the Florida Panthers have been the last 3 seasons, but I do think that there's potential for him to kind of push all the right buttons and make, the majority of those things go well, and that will hopefully lead to some success on the ice. First of all, Jackson Lacombe. I mean, there's not a whole lot you can say here, because he's just really good at everything. Like, there's very few things that he doesn't do very well. I mean, he's not a very good one-timer defenseman in terms of, like, generating one-timers. It's like, okay, sure, that's fine. But everything else that he does is so good. I mean, he's able to generate a ton of high danger passes. He's really good in the cycle. He's really good on the rush. His controlled entries are fantastic. He enters the zone really effectively. He exits the zone with the puck extremely well. He wins a lot of his retrievals. He exits the zone a ton. There's so much that he does well. I mean, his forechecking is great. His entry denial is fantastic. He did everything right last season, and if he can do that again, like, holy shit, you're talking about a player that Joel Quenneville's going to fall in love with immediately. And now the question is, how repeatable is this? It's hard to say, right? It's hard to say. We've seen defensemen have breakout seasons like this and then just turn into, some of the best defensemen in the NHL. We've also seen defensemen have breakout seasons like this and then kind of fall off and never be able to repeat it. So we'll be able to tell. Like, talk to me in like December, and we'll have a good idea of what Jackson Lacombe looks like. His long-term outlook looks like in a better picture. But like, if you're a Ducks fan, like, you can't be anything other than extremely optimistic about having a true number one defenseman on your team right now. Like, really, like, I don't think there's not another answer to that question, right? Like, I think you've been looking for that, and you thought maybe it was Zellweger, maybe it was Mintyukov. Now you have Jackson Lacombe, who's played better than any of those players have in any stretch of games. And he was able to do it for a full season. And that's what gives me a lot of hope here, because he just kind of like stepped onto the ice last season and was like, I'm going to be a number one defenseman now. And it was like everything he did was just right. Like, literally, like, there's not a ton of defensemen. Now, there's defensemen that have done it at a higher level, right? Like, I think there's better two-way defensemen in the league. But in terms of just like coming on and being good at everything like this, there's very few defensemen that would be able to do that. And that gets me really excited, because there's not really, it's more just like making sure that he can keep that up rather than having to develop a part of his skill set. And that makes things a lot easier from a coaching perspective, because then you can kind of focus on a bunch of little things and kind of improving in the margins throughout the season, instead of trying to completely rework how a player plays, and that can take a long time, and then you can't really develop anything else. So in terms of like what Jackson Lacombe looked like last year, if he can just do that again, and then you can get another 4% out of him, then you're looking at somebody who could be pushing to that like top 10 defenseman in the NHL conversation. And I don't think that's a stretch at all. Like, I think he's extremely, extremely underrated. And it's just a matter of him having to. It's a matter of if he can repeat it, right? If he can do what he did last year and just continue to improve, then yeah, the Ducks have a true number one defenseman on their hands. Radko Gudas, like I said, took a step down last year. It wasn't a huge step down, but he definitely wasn't as effective as he was, and he's going into his age 35 season, so that's reasonable. But at $4 million, I mean, he's still it's a solid contract for a number 3 or 4 defenseman, and defensively he's still extremely useful. And no, it's not just because he hits a lot; it's because his positioning is actually really good. And that's the thing about Gudas, is he hits a ton, but it's not like even when he goes for hits, like, he doesn't leave himself vulnerable when he does it. Like, that's his primary method of getting a player off the puck, but he doesn't do it recklessly most of the time. A vast majority of the time when he is going to lay the body, he's doing it in a way that's going to protect him in terms of like getting burnt. And I think that's really important in terms of what makes Gudas effective now, because that using his physicality is the primary mode of his defending. It can lead to him not being very good on the power play or on the penalty kill, because it's a lot harder to be a physical defenseman when you're down a man, right? It's a lot harder to not leave yourself vulnerable when you try to go lay a hit down a man. So that is like likely at least from what I've seen, likely the reason why his penalty kill numbers are so poor compared to his high-end defensive numbers 5-on-5. And there's not really any fixing that at this point, right? Like, he's 35 years old. There's actually no point to really trying to develop that, because by the time you figure it out, he'll have deteriorated enough that it won't really matter. So it just kind of is what it is, right? Like, he's not somebody that I have on the penalty kill a ton, right? Especially for a team that's bad on the penalty kill. But as a second pair defenseman, even ideally as like a third pair defenseman playing a shutdown role, he'd be even more effective. But he's still able to play those second pair minutes. So I guess like run him till the wheels fall off at this point. But I appreciate Radko Gudas for how he plays defense in a way that like old school raw hockey fans love, because he lays the body a lot and he's physical. But the stat nerds like, because he actually does it in a way that's super effective. And he's able to pick his moments, which he picks a lot of moments because he gets a lot of hits, but they're not hits that are going to put him out of position. He also doesn't miss checks a lot, which is another reason why he has so many hits, right? Because a lot of physical players they'll whiff on hits a lot, and Radko Gudas really doesn't. So his success rate is pretty high, which for somebody with the volume of hits that he makes is actually pretty impressive. So he's kind of the perfect balance of what both sides of the hockey community like, and I don't even think the hockey community really realized that. I don't think the analytics people really realized that, how much they'd actually like Radko Gudas if they paid more attention to him. But it's a West Coast team that doesn't win a lot of games, so they don't get a lot of attention right now, unfortunately. Jacob Trouba is kind of the opposite, whereas Jacob Trouba really had a hard nosedive fall off, right? Like he was great in Winnipeg. He was really good in his first year in New York, and then the wheels just started to fall off a little bit. And a lot of that is the pressure of just being in New York and being this, a top pair defenseman. I hope that Jacob Trouba can kind of step back here and not, realize that he doesn't have to be, even the second or third best. And this is why, development from Zellweger and Mintyukov would be so important, because then you can really just nurture Jacob Trouba into being, a nice, depth defenseman. And maybe, if you want to continue the, we've been doing Rinkside Regression, we've been doing the Chicago Blackhawks comparisons, and maybe this is kind of like your Brian Campbell comparison, obviously just with completely flipped ages, but just kind of, your middle of the lineup, offensive defenseman who gets a lot of credit for being good, but his defensive liabilities are covered up quite a bit. Now, Brian Campbell is a better defender than Jacob Trouba is, but that's kind of the best I got for if you want to compare it to the dynasty Chicago Blackhawks teams. So yeah, I think again, I think Jacob Trouba in a full year in Anaheim under Joel Quenneville should be able to improve. You'd hope. But again, he's 32, so I don't know if we see a big jump. We've seen, I kind of talked about this in the last thing with with Ryan Pulock, where we've seen these older defensemen really bounce back after having a couple bad years, and they enter the twilight of their career actually pretty high. And then we've seen defensemen just continue to fall and just turn into black holes. So Jacob Trouba is kind of in the coin flip era. I'm interested to see what he looks like in Anaheim, especially by December. I think that's where we're really going to kind of have a good idea of what the Ducks are going to be. Will be by that kind of December 1st time slot. And if they're fighting for a playoff spot and everybody looks good, then things are looking up. And if not, then well, they're not. Pavel Mintyukov is the other defenseman that I wanted to cover here, and his defensive ability just kind of deteriorated last year. He was given a bigger role. He's playing about almost 18 minutes a night, and it seemed like too much for him. It seemed like he had a really strong year 2 years ago, playing in more limited minutes, and then they elevated his role last season, and he just wasn't ready for it. And I had a lot of high hopes for Mintyukov. You can go back and listen to my Anaheim video last year, where I praised him for being really unique and interesting young defenseman, and basically none of that came true. Right? He just had a horrible season, and I really the Ducks blue line is going to. I don't want to say it will live or die with how Pavel Mintyukov plays, but he'll be a very big role, because if he can slot in as a number 2 or number 3 defenseman, then you can kind of throw everybody else around and make it work, right? If he's at worst a number 3 defenseman next year, then you can Brad Kogutis and Jacob Trouba have enough experience that they can survive on a first line and a second line, and then you can kind of figure it out from there with Zellweger and Helleson or whoever else you want to throw into the bottom pair. So making sure that he can be an important piece for this team is key to the success of this blue line. That doesn't mean he has to be the best player on the team. I don't even think he has to be the second best defenseman on the team, but he needs to be good enough that you can kind of take some of the pressure off everybody else. And finally, Olen Zellweger is kind of the other interesting piece. And now he is only 22, which is crazy because it feels like he's been in the NHL forever. And the fact that he's only 22 actually gives me a ton of hope in terms of his value, because he got better. Last year was better than the year before, and that's a good sign, especially offensively. He took a big step offensively last year, and I need to see him take the next step. And again, working with a coach who has been, very good at developing young defensemen, I have faith in what Olen Zellweger can look like. It's just going to be a matter of putting it all together for him. And if you can get a good, number 4 defenseman out of Olen Zellweger at worst this year, then this Ducks blue line is going to be very underrated in terms of what it can be. But there's a lot of questions about it, and I haven't seen it yet from him. And I'm really hoping I do, because I really like Olen Zellweger, and I really hope that we can see him take that next step. And again, 22 years old, going into your age 22 season, it gives me a lot of faith in him breaking out, because like a lot of defensemen don't even get to the NHL by that point, and he's got 2 years under his belt. So that gives me a lot of hope in terms of what he could look like going into the season. And he's not going to be asked to do a whole lot, right? If Mintyukov can look solid to start, he's really not going to be asked to do much more than be a 4 or 5 guy to start the year, and then they can kind of move him up from there. Finally, the goalies. I mean, Lucas Dostal, like I said, I really like. I need to see more. Like, I need to see him do it again. And then I'll have more faith, because goalies are so weird, right? And people are going to be in the comments, oh my God, like he's great. And sure, like I believe in him. I'm not saying that he's a bad goalie. But goalies are so volatile, and they could fluctuate so drastically year to year. And I just need to see more than one season. And he had a very, very, very good season last year. His season before that was okay, right? Like he had flashes of looking really good, but he also had flashes of not looking very good. His career goals saved above expected numbers are, on par with Stuart Skinner. So, I just need one more season. And not having the safety net of John Gibson is going to be a big test for him. And Peter Mrazek's a fine goalie to bring in here. Peter Mrazek's somebody who I think is a solid enough backup. He'll be able to take on some of those games. But if Peter Mrazek's playing 35 games this year, then that might be an issue. If he's getting close to that 40 game mark, then that means Dostal is not taking that step forward that he needs to as a full-time starter, and they obviously have faith in him because they moved on from Gibson. So I'm intrigued to see how he looks, and I have faith in him. This isn't me trying to rag on Lucas Dostal. I think he's a very exciting young goaltender. I just need to see another season, because goalies have burnt me too many times for me to outwardly believe in a goaltender before I've seen it for more than a season or two. And finally, the special teams. Again, it's a unit that I need to see click, right? And there's a ton of potential here, right? Like if you look at the power play, the first line power play, Leo Carlson, Mason McTavish, and Jackson Lacombe are the 3 worst players on it in terms of my rating, and all 3 of those players are guys that I think take a step forward, right? Like the power play 2 has opportunities for guys to take a step forward. I mean, Olen Zellweger's on that, Cutter Gauthier on that. Both those guys I expect to take pretty big steps forward. For Toronto, Strome and Killorn were the other 3 players that Puckpedia had on it. I have less optimism about those guys, figuring it out. But I'd expect Mikael Granlund to get a look on that unit as well. So maybe there's potential there. But even with guys like Cutter Gauthier, like I definitely think he'll improve as a power play guy, and even on the penalty kill, right? Like a lot of the players here are guys that are either really good or guys that can push other players out of the lineup, and I'm excited to see kind of what the development of the Ducks looks like, because now they have a coach that I believe in terms of his hockey tactics, and they have a team that's still pretty exciting in terms of the youth that they have on it, and they still have some really exciting guys coming up. I mean, Beckett Seneca and Roger McQueen are both waiting in the wings to take steps onto that top 6 as well. So it's not like the road has ended here for the Ducks if things don't work out this year. But I do think this is a team that very much could be pushing for a wildcard spot by the end of the season. All right, so joining me now is Kyle Kjer from the Locked On Anaheim Ducks podcast. And first of all, Cal, thank you so much for coming on here to talk about the Anaheim Ducks. It's been an exciting offseason from my point of view, and I'm sure it's been exciting getting ready for this season.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, it's definitely a lot of new faces, new places, and a lot of change coming this way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess uh, first of all, here just to kind of jump into it, touching on that, a lot of changes for this team. Obviously, the Chris Kreider trade very early in the offseason, and then the Trevor Zegras move. Obviously, bringing in Joel Quenneville, signing Mikael Granlund. A lot of changes to a team that has always been fairly exciting to fans, but hasn't quite taken that next step yet. What do you think some reasonable expectations should be for fans of the Ducks going into this season?
That's a great question because I've been kind of mulling this over myself. I feel like there's a lot of expectations from the fan base to make a bigger jump. I think when you bring in the second most winning coach in NHL history as the new head coach, and then also hiring other coaches like Jay Woodcroft to be the assistants, there's a lot of hope for this team, and I think the talent that they brought in isn't necessarily game breaking. Like it, obviously, they did not pan out with Mitch Marner or Nikolai Ehlers, but Mikael Granlund brings a good spice to the game. And then Chris Kreider is going to bring an element that the team really needs in secondary scoring. A lot of their play last year under Greg Cronin was on the perimeter and not a lot happening in the middle. So I think they're going to get a lot more points through Chris Kreider kind of setting that example of crashing in the middle of the ice and being in those danger areas. And that's going to lead to a pretty productive season. I think they're going to be on that cusp of either battling for a wild card spot or just maybe squeaking in the third place in the Pacific. That's my like full ultimate dream scenario. But the more likely is that they're going to be kind of battling for that wild card area.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, aside from Vegas and Edmonton, who I'm assuming everybody has as the top two teams in the Pacific, if the Ducks are to push for that third spot, what would you see needing to happen for this team to kind of solidify themselves into a solid playoff position?
I think the big thing is going to be consistency. They need to have consistent scoring, consistent defensive play, and really just keeping a win streak alive. They had a lot of ups and downs last season. There were sparks where you're like, "Ooh, they're actually making a push right now." I think they need to treat every single game from the beginning of October to the end of May. That all needs to be like full we're coming in every single game trying to win and actually playing hard like we're in the playoffs every single game. That's going to be the biggest difference, and they can't have these little slumps where they just kind of play whatever and don't show up. It needs to be every single game is meaningful minutes.
Yeah, 100%. If you had to look at this roster right now, is there a particular area of concern that you have, or something that you hope that maybe they can address either before the season starts or at some point during this year?
I think the biggest concern that I have right now is the defensive core is pretty much the same as last year, and not a lot has changed there. They signed Drew Hellison back. Olin Zellweger needs to take a step up. Pavel Minchikov needs to take a step up, and they have the staples of Gudis and Truba still locked in. So I know those guys are going to bring that veteran presence, but not a lot there is different from last year, and they had a lot of struggles in the defensive department last year. So Quenville's got his work cut out for him on getting this defensive core a little bit more stable and blocking a lot more shots and making that result in offensive scoring chances.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned Zellweger and Mintikov there, but is there a prospect that hasn't fully broke out into the NHL yet that you're excited to possibly see this year?
The big one that I'm looking forward to is Stan Solberg. He's Norwegian. He came over from the Swedish league and just immediately made an impact with the San Diego Gulls. And a lot of the scouts and predictions have him kind of being a similar player to Gudis and Truba, just being hard nosed, big, good at angling guys off, and just will blow through people through the boards. So if he can kind of take that next step and really get his NHL pace underneath him, that's someone that really is going to be making an impact on this league once he does break through.
Yeah, absolutely. I really liked him out of the draft back when he was taken too. So I'm excited to see him possibly get a full shot at a an NHL spot this year.
He looked really solid at development camp when they have all the rookies after the draft. They come and do kind of a week camp, and he looked good out there. Granted, it's all prospects and there aren't really top NHLers, and it's you get maybe 75-80% out of the guys, but he was looking solid out there. His angles are great, his foot speed's great, and it's going to be exciting to see how training camp actually goes with him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the final thing here is just: is there a player on the Ducks that you think doesn't get enough recognition, or is somebody that you're like a huge fan of that you really want more casual fans to start talking about? Because obviously, like the Troy Terrys are going to get a lot. I mean, I guess Troy Terry doesn't get a ton of national recognition either. But in terms of the Ducks stars, he's probably one of the more notable ones. But is there somebody on the team that you really love that you hope can get more attention?
Well, he kind of said Troy Terry, he's known from his Olympics and his
Yeah.
time at DU, but I think he's one of those guys that plays such a solid game and he's such a professional, and like it's terrifying to look how many seasons he's already been in the league. Like he's legitimately a veteran now, and to me he's still just a young kid, but he's solid. I really like the way that he plays, but I think there's some guys coming up in the younger crowd like Sam Colangelo. He just got signed, and I think when he really played meaningful minutes at last season, he really showed up well. So I think he's going to be someone that's going to be turn a lot of heads this year. And now that he's locked in, it's just that extra little confidence to help him boost his offense this year. And I think he's going to be cracking the roster fairly often this season.
All right, well, awesome. That's definitely somebody to keep an eye out for as people are watching this and people are watching the Ducks this year. They should be a really fun team. I'm excited for what things will look like.
Definitely big expectations, and it's going to be nice to have playoff hockey back in Orange County.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so that's all I got for you. If you wanna plug where people can find you and listen to more of your stuff, the floor is yours.
Absolutely. You can find us on YouTube at Locked On Anaheim Ducks. We're on Twitter at LO_Ducks, or just any social media. Look up Locked On Anaheim Ducks because there is the Locked On Oregon Ducks. So do not get them confused. We're orange, not green. But we're out there. And then my handle is my last name, KJER Talk Sports. So Car Talk Sports. And that's also the website where you can send any questions, cartalksports.com.
All right, awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us here and talking about the Ducks. And yeah, this was great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great talking and looking forward to a good season for Anaheim.
And there you have it. There is the Anaheim Ducks deep dive. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you are interested in following the rest of the series, subscribe to the channel. We will be posting a deep dive on every team in the NHL. Maybe we've already posted your favorite team. So you can go check out the older videos that are all listed on YouTube. And I know some people don't like, having a YouTube video playing for an hour on their phone or computer or whatever. We have all the audios on Spotify and Apple. So you can go listen to those and you can have your screen off. And those are all available too for free. So just look up NBA Hockey on Spotify and Apple. You can listen to the live versions of these. They come out the exact same time as the video. Follow the Instagram as well for more live updates. You can follow my Twitter, where I'll be posting some stuff as well. So there's content all over the place, and content will not be stopping after the off season. There'll be stuff coming out all season. So this is just kind of the start of the rollout for the year. So thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.